Hello, students. Today, let's read the short story, The Bed, written by famous Russian writer Anton Chekov. This is a brilliant short story written by Anton Chekov. Anton Chekhov, as you know, is a Russian writer. He's a playwright, one of the important modern writer. His short stories are very engrossing, very interesting to read. So this short story that we have in the second semester textbook, The Bet, is indeed interesting. We have two main characters in the story, an old banker and a young lawyer. So as the title of the story suggests, The Bet, there is an interesting bet in the story. Let's read and find out what the bet is and what happens after the bet. It was a dark autumn night. The old banker was walking up and down his study and remembering how 15 years before he had given a party one autumn evening. There had been many clever men there, and there had been interesting conversations. Among other things, they had talked of capital punishment. The majority of the guests, among whom were many journalists and intellectual men, disapproved of the death penalty. They considered that form of punishment out of date, immoral, and unsuitable for Christian states. So, who is the main character that is presented in the beginning of the story? Yes, it is the old banker. So, what is he remembering about? He is remembering about an incident that happened 15 years ago on an autumn evening. So, there were many guests for the party, and what were they discussing about? They had an interesting conversation. They were talking about capital punishment, that is, death punishment, death penalty. And what did the majority of the guests say? Majority of the guests were intelligent people, and they said that death penalty is a kind of crude punishment. Okay, it is out of date, it is immoral, and it is unsuitable for Christian states. In the opinion of some of them, the death penalty ought to be replaced everywhere by imprisonment for life. I don't agree with you, said their host and the banker. I have not tried either the death penalty or the imprisonment for life, but if one may judge a priori, the death penalty is more moral and more humane than imprisonment for life. Who said this? Who said that death penalty is better than imprisonment? The old banker said it. He hasn't experienced both of the punishments, but then he found the death penalty more humane than imprisonment. Capital punishment kills a man at once. It is sudden death for death penalty, but lifelong imprisonment kills him slowly. So the intention of both punishments is death. One is sudden death, the other one is slow death. Which executioner is the more humane? He who kills you in few minutes, or he who drags the life out of you in course of many years? So who's talking here? The old banker is talking. Is it the present? No, it is past. It is flashback kind. He is recollecting his experiences. Okay, he is recollecting about an incident that happened 15 years ago. Both are equally immoral, observed one of the guests. There are lot many intellectual people gathered over there for the party. So one guest told that both are equally immoral, for they both have the same object, to take away life. The state is not God. It has not the right to take away what it cannot restore when it wants to. So the state, um, through capital punishment, is taking away precious life, but will it be able to give it back? No. So he says that it is not correct. Among the guests was a young lawyer. a young man of 25 years. When he was asked his opinion, he said, the death sentence and life sentence are equally immoral, but if I had to choose between the death penalty and imprisonment for life, I would certainly choose the second. To live anyhow is better than not at all. So, the young lawyer, who's 25 years old, opines that life imprisonment is better than death penalty. Uh, why did he say so? Because he felt that to live anyhow is better than to die. A lively discussion arose. The banker, who was younger and more nervous in those days, was suddenly carried away by excitement. He struck the table with his fist and shouted at the young man, it's not true. I'll bet you 2 million you wouldn't stay in imprisonment. Solitary confinement for how many years? 5 years. So, who was in excitement? The young banker was in excitement, and he said, I bet you for 2 million you will not be able to stay in solitary confinement, in isolation, in loneliness for 5 years. If you mean that in earnest, said the young man, I'll take the bet, but I would stay not 5 years but 15 years. He is even more excited, the young lawyer. So, what does he say? He says that not only for 5 years, but I can stay for 15 years lonely in a single room. 15? Done? Cried the banker. Gentlemen, I stake 2 million. Agreed. You stake your millions and I stake my freedom, said the young man. How foolish is it? What do you feel? At the age of 25, he is voluntarily going into confinement, voluntarily going into imprisonment for 15 years. And this wild, senseless bet was carried out. The banker, spoiled and frivolous, with millions beyond his reckoning, was delighted at the bet. So, how did the banker feel about the bet? He was money minded. Okay, so he had all calculation in his mind and he was not serious at all. He thought the person will not be, the young man will not be able to stay in confinement for 15 years. So, definitely, I'll get the money. Think better of it, young man. While there is still time, to me, 2 million is a trifle. It's a small amount, but you are losing 3 or 4 of the best years of your life. I say 3 or 4 because you won't stay longer. Don't forget either, you unhappy man, that voluntary confinement is a great deal harder to bear than compulsory. So, this is not a punishment. He is going according to his wish. He thought that the thought that you have the right to step out in liberty at any moment will poison your whole existence in prison. I'm sorry for you, said the banker. And now the banker, walking to and fro, remembered all this and asked himself. So we have come back to the present. We were in the flashback. The banker was thinking about what happened 15 years ago, and there is a pause. Now the banker is in present. He is walking to and fro. He remembered all this and asked himself, what was the object of that bet? What is the good of that man's losing 15 years of his life and my throwing away 2 million? So, what is the benefit of the bet? Is there anything good? Can it prove that the death penalty is better or worse than imprisonment for life? So they started discussing about death penalty and life imprisonment. So even if the young man stayed in imprisonment for 15 years, they can't prove that one of the punishments is better because it is individualistic. No, no, it was all nonsensical and meaningless. On my part, it was the caprice of the pampered man, and on his part, simple greed for money. Okay. Then he remembered what followed that evening. It was decided that the young man should spend the years of captivity under strict strictest supervision in one of the lodges in the banker's garden. So, what did they decide? They decided that the young man should be in isolation, imprisonment, and he will be supervised. Now, he has to be lonely in one of the lodges in the banker's garden. It was agreed that for 15 years he should not be free to cross the threshold of the lodge, to see human beings, to hear human voice. So, all these are barred for the young man. Now, he was allowed to have a musical instrument and books, and was allowed to write letters, to drink wine, and smoke. By the terms of agreement, the only relations he could have with the outer world were a little window made purposely for that object. So, think how you'll feel if you are put into a room. We had this kind of experience during COVID 19. We were in solitary confinement, we were in isolation during the COVID period, during the lockdown period. So, we understood how difficult it is to stay in isolation without any social interaction. So, this man, this young lawyer, is going into voluntary confinement. He might have anything he wanted. He can have books, he can have musical instruments, wine, smoke, everything. But then, in any quantity he desired by writing an order. The agreement provided for every detail and every trifle that would make his imprisonment strictly solitary, and bound the young man to stay there exactly 15 years, beginning from 12 o'clock of November 14th, 1870. So, when is the imprisonment beginning? November 14th, 1870. And when is it ending? At 12 o'clock of November 14th, 1885. The slightest attempt on his part to break the conditions, if only 2 minutes before the end, relieves the banker from the obligation to pay him the 2 million. So, if he breaks the agreement even before 2 minutes before the end, he will not get the money. What do you think about the bet? It's senseless bet. But we understand that there are a lot of positivities involved in the confinement. Okay, we'll read further and then we'll understand what are those. For the first year of confinement, as far as one could judge from his brief notes, the prisoner suffered severely from loneliness and depression. Obviously, he is not getting adjusted to the loneliness, so he suffered from loneliness and depression. The sounds of the piano could be heard continually day and night from his lodge. He refused wine and tobacco. Wine, he wrote, excites the desires, and desires are the worst foes of the prisoner. So, it just burns, ignites his desires, and it is an enemy for the prisoner. And besides, nothing could be more dreary than drinking good wine and seeing no more. He doesn't have any company to drink good wine, so he has to sit alone and then drink, which is so boring. And tobacco spoiled the air of his room. In the first year, the books he sent for were principally of light character, novels with complicated love plot, sensational and fantastic stories, and so on. So, what are the kind of books that he sent for in the first year? Complicated love plot. So, light reading, that is what he meant in the first year. In the second year, the piano was silent in the lodge, and the prisoner asked only for the classics. So, you can find there is a gradation, there is a change from the kind of love plots that he read in the first year to classics in the second year. In the fifth year, music was audible again. So, he stopped playing piano in the second year, and after in the fifth year, he started playing piano again. And the prisoner asked for wine. Those who watched him through the window said that all that year he spent doing nothing but eating and drinking and lying on his bed, frequently yawning and angrily talking to himself. So he is getting irritated. He is just spending time eating and drinking and lounging. He did not read books in the fifth year. Sometimes at night, he would sit down to write. He would spend hours writing, and in the morning tear up all that he had written. More than once, he could be heard crying. So, what is he doing in the fifth year? He is writing something and all, but then he'll tear up everything that he has written in the morning, and he could also be heard crying. In the second half of the sixth year, the prisoner began zealously studying languages. So he is very enthusiastically studying languages and philosophy and history. He threw himself eagerly into this study. So he is productively using the time that he is in confinement. He started learning lot many languages. He started reading philosophical books, and he started reading history also. So much so that the banker had enough to do to get him the books he ordered. In the course of 4 years, some 600 volumes were procured at his request. So by 10th year, he has read how many books? 600 volumes. It was during this period that the banker received the following letter from his prisoner. So, in the 10th year, the banker received a letter from the prisoner. What is he saying in the letter? My dear jailer, I write to you these lines in six languages. Oh my God, he has learned how many languages? Six languages. Show them to people who know the languages. Let them read it. Let them read them. If you find not one mistake, I implore you to fire a shot in the garden. So you can read it, you can make the language pundits read it, and if you don't find a single mistake, then you fire a shot in the garden. That shot will show me that my efforts have not been thrown away. So from that shot, I can understand that my hard work has not been wasted. Geniuses of all ages and of all lands speak different languages, but the same flame burns in them all. If you only knew what unearthly happiness my soul feels now from being able to understand them. So he's trying to understand unearthly happiness. The prisoner's desire was fulfilled. The banker ordered two shots to be fired in the garden. So, excellent piece of writing in six languages. That's why the banker ordered two shots to be fired in the garden. Then, after the 10th year, how many years completed? 10 years completed, 5 more years to go. The prisoner sat immovably at the table and read nothing but the gospel. So, what is he reading? Biblical books, gospels. Yeah, gospel is a record of Jesus' life and teachings in the Bible. It seemed strange to the banker that a man who in 4 years had mastered 600 learned volumes should waste nearly a year over one thin book easy of comprehension. Theology and histories of religion followed gospel. So he's reading it so deeply. That's why he's taking one whole year to read that thin book of gospel. The banker is not able to understand his intention. Theology and histories of religion followed the gospel. So, in depthly studying, that is what the young man is doing. He has changed a lot. The confinement has brought a lot of positive changes in the young lawyer. In the last 2 years of his confinement, the prisoner read immense quantity of books quite indiscriminately. At one time, he was busy with the natural sciences. Then he would ask for Byron or Shakespeare. There were notes in which he demanded at the same time books on chemistry and manual of medicine and a novel. So his taste is changing. He is asking for science books. The old banker remembered all this and thought, tomorrow at 12 o'clock he'll regain his freedom. By our agreement, I ought to pay him 2 million. If I do pay him, it's all over with me. I'll not have any penny left with me. 15 years before, his millions had been beyond his reckoning. Now he was afraid to ask himself which were greater, his debts or his assets. So this banker has gone through financial problems. So earlier, during the time of bet, he had a lot of money with him, but due to gambling and wastage of money, now he doesn't have much money. So if he gives off the 2 million to the young lawyer, then he'll not be left with any amount. Cursed bed, muttered the old man, clutching his head in despair. Why did the man die? He is only 40 now. He'll take my last penny and he'll marry, will enjoy life, will gamble on the exchange, while I shall look at him with envy like a beggar. So I'll become a beggar if I give the whole money to him. I'm indebted to you for the happiness of my life. Let me help you. No, it's too much. The one means of being saved from bankruptcy and disgrace is the death of that man. So he just thinks if the young lawyer gives at least half of the money to the banker, but that will not happen. He understands. So the only way possible is the death of the young lawyer. It struck 3 o'clock. The banker listened. Everyone was asleep in the house, and nothing could be heard outside but the rustling of the chill trees. So, this is the last day of imprisonment, and the weather is rainy. It was dark and cold in the garden. Rain was falling. A damp, cutting wind was racing about the garden, howling and giving the trees no rest. The banker strained his eyes but could see neither the earth nor the white statues nor the lodges nor the trees. So the watchman is not there before the lodge. If I had plucked to carry out my intention, thought the old man, suspicion would fall first on the watchman. So if I kill the young man, then people will think that the watchman would have killed the young lawyer. He felt in the darkness for the steps and the door and went into the entry of the lodge. Then he groped his way into the little passage and lighted a match. So he's going to open a door which has not been opened for how many years? For 15 years. 5 minutes passed and the prisoner did not once stir. 15 years of imprisonment had taught him to sit still. So there is no movement at all in that room. The banker tapped at the window with his finger, and the prisoner made no movement whatever in response. Then the banker cautiously broke the seals of the door and put the key into the keyhole. So there is rust on that lock, and the door creaked because it has not been used for several years. The banker expected to hear at once footsteps and a cry of astonishment, but there is nothing surprising in the room. There is complete silence. At the table, a man, unlike ordinary people, was sitting motionless. So he was motionless and he looked like a skeleton because of this confinement for 15 years. Poor creature, thought the banker, he's asleep and most likely dreaming of the millions. And I have only to take this half dead man, throw him on the bed. So it is easy to kill that young man. That is what the old banker, the greedy old banker, is thinking. The banker took the page from the table and read as follows. So there is a letter on the table. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock, I regain my freedom and right to associate with other men. But before I leave this room and see the sunshine, I think it necessary to say a few words to you. With a clear conscience, I tell you, as before God who beholds me, that I despise freedom and life and health and all that in your books is called good things of the world. For 15 years, I have been intently studying earthly life. It is true, I have not seen earth nor men, but in your books I have drunk fragrant wine, I have sung songs, I have experienced everything under the sun by reading lots and lots of books. Your books have given me wisdom, all that the unresting thought of man have created in the ages compressed into a small compass in my brain. So everything is there in my brain. I know that I am wiser than all of you. I have gained so much of wisdom from the books that I have read. We'll go to this paragraph. You can read it later. You have lost your reason and taken the wrong path. You have taken lies for truth and hideousness for beauty. You would marvel if, owing to strange events of some sorts, frogs and lizards suddenly grew on apple and orange trees instead of fruit, or if roses began to smell like sweating horse. I marvel at you who exchange heaven for earth. I don't want to understand you, so I don't want to understand the kind of people around me, but I know that I have improved a lot due to this confinement. My wisdom has grown much, much more. When the banker had read this, he laid this page on the table, kissed the strange man on head, and went out of the lodge weeping. So it is a kind of mental transformation for the banker as well, because while coming, he was intending to kill the young lawyer, but then after reading that emotional note, you can find a change in the old banker as well. Next morning, the watchman ran in with pale faces and told him that they had seen the man who lived in the lodge climb out of the window into the garden, go to the gate, and disappear. So, this young man had so much of life, so much of vigor and energy in him, but then he was so disciplined that he stayed in the room in the lodge for 15 years, and after the confinement, he just jumped out of the room through the window, and he got to the gate and disappeared from there. The banker went at once with the servants to the lodge and made sure of the flight of his prisoner. So he is no more there. To avoid arousing unnecessary talk, he took from the table the writing in which millions were renounced. So he doesn't need the millions now. I renounce your million. I don't want your millions of amount. I don't care it. Your millions is so less when I compare it with the wisdom that I have gained in this 15 years. And when he got home, locked it up in fireproof safe. So the banker takes it with him and he keeps the letter with him safe. He doesn't want to share that information um, with other people. So how did you find this story? Brilliant short story. So you read it on your own. You have also a audio story available in the website. Go through it, listen to it, and enjoy. So learn the question answers. Try to write the summary of the story on your own. Thank you. Thank you for listening.